Hi, I'm Jason and welcome to part 4 of the Learning Linux command line series. In this tutorial, it's going to be a little bit boring, so I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to skip it. We're going to be looking at the actual folder structure of Linux to get a better understanding of what purpose each folder serves. Now, you probably notice when we're looking in the root directory, so let's go into the file system here so we can see we got root at the top, so this is our root directory. We have the following folders. So let's start from the top left and I'll try to explain their purpose. Okay, so let's start with bin. This stands for binaries. So like the commands that we run in the terminal window, like ls and pwd and things like that, they are all the essential programs that we use in single user mode. The boot directory. The boot directory contains the files needed to boot the system. For example, the grub bootloader. Some of you may have that display screen come up asking you how you want to start Linux. And also, all of the Linux kernels are stored here. It's not really a place to go poking around. So if you don't know what you're doing, you could potentially ruin your operating system. So I would avoid this directory at all costs until you really get to grips with Linux. The CD-ROM directory. The CD-ROM directory isn't really part of the FHS standard. It's more of a legacy folder. However, you'll still find it on Ubuntu and other operating systems like that. And its main purpose was for a temporary location for CD-ROMs inserted into the system. But today, the standard location of temporary media tends to be inside the /media directory. So next up is the dev directory, or otherwise known as the devices directory. So this is where all your devices are located. So things like webcams, keyboards, CD-ROMs and hard drives. So in this one, if I scroll down, I'll just give you an example of the hard drive. Hard drives normally pop up as SDA. There you see my hard drive there is SDA, and then each partition on that drive will have a number assigned to it. So we can see we've got a partition of SDA1, so that'll be a partition on that main drive. And you might have SDA1, SDA2, SDA3, or even SDB, depending on the drives that you've got connected. So going back, next up, what have we got? We got the etc directory known as etc. It contains system-wide configuration files, not to be confused with the user configuration files, as these would be situated in the individual user's home folders. And then we got the home directory. This is the directory that contains the home folder for each user. So for example, if your name is Bob or Fred, you will have a folder in here called Bob or Fred, as you can see here. And my name's Jason and I've got a Jason folder. And there is another user on the system here called Nikki. And basically the folder contains the user data, such as user specific configurations, which you can normally see in there. And each user tends to only have write access to their own home folder. So next up is lib. So I'm going to say we'll cover lib64, and you may even have lib32, 64 and 32-bit. So these folders are directories that contain libraries needed by the essential binaries in the /bin and /sbin folder. And they also hold libraries needed by the binaries in the /usr/bin folder, which are located in /usr/lib. So next up we have the media and MNT directory. So this is where you would find all your mounted drives like USB flash drives, external hard disks or CD-ROMs, etc. Linux used to have just the MNT directory to mount such devices, but nowadays it tends to automatically mount your external drives in the media folder. So if you were to mount stuff yourself manually, then maybe you would use the MNT directory and leave the media up to the operating system for automatic purposes. So next up is OPT. This is the optional directory, usually a place of manually installed softwares from vendors. So what have I got in there? I've got nothing in there at the moment, but I know for a fact if I was to install something like VirtualBox, it will probably end up going in the OPT folder. Next up is proc, or the process directory, similar to the dev or device directory because it doesn't contain standard files. It contains special files that represent systems and process information. Next is the root directory, which is the home directory of the root user. Instead of being located at /home/root like our user folder would be, it's located at the root of root. Yeah, no, I know before you say it. There is a root structure, the root user, and the root directory, just to make things even more confusing. So next up, the run directory. This is a place where things may run in random access memory, so RAM. So in other words, it's like a temporary file system. The minute you turn off your machine, everything in here gets wiped out. So it's not really a good idea to install anything here because it won't be there next time you reboot. It's mainly used for processes that start early in the operating system boot process to store like runtime procedure information and stuff like that. The sbin, it's similar to the /bin directory. The only difference is that it contains essential binaries that are generally intended to be run by the root user for system administration. So sbin for admin, bin is for single user logon. Next up is SRV, or the service data directory. The /srv directory contains data for services provided by the system. So if you had created an FTP web server, you would use this folder to store your files that were to be downloaded externally. Also, you'd likely store your website's files in a directory inside the SRV directory. So in other words, it's stuff that you would serve up to the World Wide Web, I guess. Next is the sys directory. This folder gives a way to interact with the kernel. It's similar to the run directory, but anything in here is not physically written to the disk. It is populated every time the system boots up and leaves nothing when the system is restarted or shut down. The TMP directory, which of course is the temporary directory. Applications can store files that could be used by a session. An example would be if you were writing a document, the auto saves of that document would reside here. Next folder is the USR, and this is generally a user application space. I think it stands for Unix System Resource Directory. So this directory contains applications and files used by users as opposed to applications and files used by the system. For example, non-essential applications are located inside the /usr/bin directory instead of the /bin. And non-essential system administration binaries are located in the /usr/sbin directory instead of the /sbin directory. Libraries for each are located inside the /usr/lib directory, and the /usr directory also contains other directories. For example, architectural independent files like graphics are located in the /user/share. So to put it in a nutshell, the /usr/local directory is where locally compiled applications install to by default, and this prevents them from mucking up the rest of the system. And lastly, we have the var directory. So the var directory is the writable counterpart to the /usr directory, which must be read-only in normal operation. Log files and everything else that would normally be written to the /usr during normal operations are written to the /var. So for example, when you go in here, you'll find log files. So lastly, going back, there is one more folder that you may see that I haven't mentioned here, as I don't seem to have it on display, is the lost and found directory. So the lost and found folder is part of the Linux operating system. Each file system, when I say each file system, I mean each partition has its own lost and found directory, and you'll find recovered bits of corrupt files in there. So that concludes this quick walkthrough on a brief overview of the file structure and the explanation of the folders in Linux. I just felt that I needed to get that out the way. So in part 5, in the next session, we'll be concentrating on making directories within the file structure. So we'll be getting back to the command line. So I hope you found this tutorial useful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.